Hello, everyone. Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. I'm talking today with Karen Edgett, who is a visionary artist, as you could tell with the stuff behind her. Lots of color and beautiful things. Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Um, well, let's see. I'm an artist first and foremost. I've been working in the arts my whole life, but I also took a good 25 years hiatus to be in the advertising world, which I absolutely loved while I was in there, because it's all about visual communications and words, and that part I really loved. Um, and now I'm back to being a full-time artist and photographer and sometimes cook. I have had some interesting journeys with my own health, and I've learned a lot about food, and I've been studying metaphysical practices for a couple decades now and incorporated that into my art and my food um, and the recipes I create, and it's just been a lot of fun. I don't know what kind of gory details you want, but I'm having a pretty good
We'll
time
get
now.
into those gory details. So it's interesting, because some art, I don't consider myself artistic, but I consider myself creative, right? I like to draw, but I would be more frustrated as an artist in the end than I would be, oh, this is wonderful. Now what can I do with it? I don't know how to apply paints or pen or ink or color. Like I don't even know how to pick stuff. So, but I still consider myself creative,
Hmm.
right? And I have lots of different ways to express my creativity. And you said cooking. That's one way I definitely do it. So let me ask you a question. Um, let's talk about color for a moment because color is food also,
Yep,
right?
there's a big
So
overlap there.
and it's expressive. So when I say the word color, I mean, what comes to mind for you? I don't want to put you on the spot with so little a question, but like colors. Like, do you ever like start with a color and then go on a color?
Um, I don't actually specifically do that. Well, I can't say that I never have done that because sometimes I teach painting, and one year I taught a class where I assigned everybody a color, the same color, in fact. And I told them we went through a whole bunch of different exercises expressing in that color, and I gave them whites and blacks to mix in with the colors so they could see all the different shades they could create. And then I told them at the end they could create a final piece with any color they choose. And it was interesting to me that everybody had chosen to stay with the same color except one, and they insisted on the color I chose is blue, and they insisted on doing a cardinal in red. So that's what I call creative.
Mhm.
Someone's, and I wish that people could replace the word work with creativity, and I think they would enjoy their lives a lot more. Although I told somebody that once, and they said that sounds like a government propaganda
But well, I think
campaign.
yeah, no, I think that we all express ourselves in a creative way. That's
Yeah,
part of what
absolutely.
humans do. And if you're lucky, you get to do work and you're allowed to create you're allowed to express yourself through that work. Even if it's a spreadsheet, you
Right.
could still, there's still creativity. So so when the reason I asked about colors because so many times I'll watch different videos and the videos will have people painting. Like I enjoy watching that type of a video, like where they start with a sketch, or they're starting with a blank screen, and they do all these
Mhm.
different things,
Right.
and they can see color, right? I can't. Not that I can't see color. I can see the
Hmm.
color. And I know, the different variations, but I don't know how to blend them, and I don't know what it. If you were to say to me, make a shadow in this drawing, I might have a problem because I don't understand. Those are things that can be taught, I'm sure, but some people just know it.
Right. And that's for them to do. I mean, I for me the color is I feel color more than I see color, and I understand color from like, completely different perspectives and colors that take shape and patterns and stuff like that. And so I feel like a color isn't just a color, it's an aliveness, it's a consciousness. And take, for instance, the color pink. Um, Pink is generally considered like the spiritual color of love and joy. And yet, if you add patterns to it, it becomes so much more powerful. And the patterns can be made in pink or any other color, it doesn't really matter, because the color becomes more energized in a way by changing the shape and being, I was schooled in the more traditional ways of art originally, how to draw shadows, for example. But to me, it's just more fun to play with color and play with the emotions of color. And even if you're taking a subject, um, rather than overly worry about the shadow, just taking the color and painting the emotion that you see of that paint of that subject, or the like there's a I don't know if you can see it, there's a painting behind me of a woman. Now she's not red, I know that, but for some reason her sitting there, I've got this intensity, an intensity came through, and I started painting with red, her whole, and it was more the emotion that's coming through and the passion and the energy of that color. Blue is a very healing color. It's often used in healing spaces like hospitals and whatnot. But if you're trying to heal something in yourself, painting with blue is a great exercise to do. Just get it out there, and you throw colors down or be really meticulous about it. It doesn't really matter. Um, and like you said, any of that can be learned, all the skills and how to draw a shadow or how to, you know, give color more expression or more mood or more patterns and stuff. But I I try to encourage people to feel the color more, because that's what I relate to. Is how does what's coming through emotionally that's tied to that color, and how other colors can enhance that motion and emotion and exasperate the message of the color. Um, that somewhat could be a science, that you could learn yourself or learn on YouTube. I mean, you just make these elaborate charts mixing all little things together, and then you try to remember what you did if you want to move quickly through abstract work. But I find that color is it's a vibration. It's a vibration that's often attached to a certain understanding or emotion or both, and has information in it, and how you pattern it is as important as the actual color itself. So color taking, like this, here's my mug, this is a photograph of some flowers, but it's not just purple. You see that there's so many shades in that purple, and there's little lines in there, and then there's little dots of yellow in there, and then there's dark spaces and light spaces. That's all energizing that color, and giving it more vibration and more information. And in the end, I think for me, the challenge when I'm painting is, how am I going to transition through this painting? And how is it going to transition the space, or a photograph for that matter? How is it transitioning me by noticing it and taking it or participating in it and doing it? And how is it going to resonate with others later and help them transition, or a space transitioned? I mean, you go into some of these big public buildings and they have this massive, interesting art, and calms people. The studies have shown it calms people. It brings people peace to know that there's this piece of art with them. And you can't exactly quantify it by saying, wow, if somebody put a swirly shape over my head in the airport, I'd be calmer, but that's the way it works. And so the shape of the art and the color of the art work together to create this, um, this vibration or emotion or, mood. Um, and, if you really want to push it, just like in nature, there's nothing really that's easy to absolutely replicate in freehand art. And each time you create it, you're shifting the consciousness around the world. And each time you study a piece of art, you're shifting, or create a piece of art yourself, you're shifting the consciousness of yourself. And it's really a fabulous process. I would encourage you to create more with abandon. Like
I
give
like to
give up the shadow part.
sew. I like to sew.
You can have a lot of fun with sewing too. There's some fabulous seamstress artists. They're throwing stitches, in all kinds of directions and creating these, not really quilts, but huge, you know, energetic vortexes with all their, magical
When I
lines and
was
stuff.
growing up, it was very cool to have patches on your pants.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, the Neil Young look. And I had a pair of pants that was all patches.
Oh, fun. Did you make
And every
it
time I
yourself?
took them off, my mother threatened to throw them away. But I have an old denim jacket that is threadbare, and um, I have recently decided to start sewing and patching and just doing different things to it. Can't make it any worse. It's pretty threadbare. So, this is what I'm saying. I'm creative.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll buy crayons and a coloring book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I, and I prefer painting by numbers, and I can't really sit outside, look at a bird and draw it. It would look okay, but I would be more frustrated in the end
Mm-hmm.
and there would be a lot of erasures all over.
Well, the paint by numbers, by the way, in those uh, magic markers and coloring books now, adult coloring books everybody has, they're actually really good for your eyes. They're good for calming you. They're like doing a meditation. And that itself is a very helpful process. So I wouldn't poo-poo any of that stuff. If you really want to color within the lines, there's a lot of benefit to be had out of that in any form of creation. In order to do that, the coloring books, you usually have to choose the color. And that alone
Yes,
is a creative process. And then they have blending tools if you really want to get into it. But that um my mom has some memory issues, and we've recently been buying her lots of these coloring books and pens and stuff, and she's so proud of each one she did. And one day my sister sent her a sailing coloring book of sailboats, and my mom opens it up and she's like, sailboats are white, sails are white. What do you want me to do? Color in the blue sky in every single one of these? It was really funny, but for the most part, it's just it's a beautiful exercise. It's a very meditative exercise and very good for your eyes, which in turn good for your brain. So I wouldn't poo-poo that.
I know. I don't. I often say to myself, this is, I just feel like buying coloring books. I just
Yeah.
feel like doing
Hmm.
it. And I also, I'm creative with words more than I am with creating stuff. But I can look at cloth and I could create something out of cloth without a pattern. So
Oh,
go
that's
figure
nice.
that out. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a real
it's
engineering feat.
yeah, it's and I think that we all have these different skills. It's just a matter of I don't know. I guess as a kid, where we play
Hmm.
And in that playing, you learn what you're good at or what you like to do. And as
Right.
an adult, you play the adult version of it. Like I said, I still like to color. Every once in a
Hmm.
while, I'll look on Amazon for an adult coloring book and I'll buy it.
Well, there's no
I
shame in that. When I visit my mom, I often color in one of her little pages. So it's
I
just, it's a great little
I
exercise.
somebody recommended to me. They said instead of buying yourself a calendar as a journal, like a calendar book or
Hmm.
an appointment book, just buy the dotted lines, a grid, and get yourself a doodle book
Oh, yes.
and create. One side can be your calendar, your appointment book, and the other side can be notes and doodles. And I was like, that's a great idea. Aren't they called? It's a type of a journal.
I don't know, but I journal a lot, and they're all mixed together. The doodles are mixed in with the, to-do lists are mixed in with the, what's downloading from the universe to me, and so that way words and images can just keep flowing through, and
I
stories
think
can
it's
keep flowing
important.
through. Yeah,
Important.
I highly recommend it. It's just, I think it's really time to for as many people as can to get contemplative with whatever they're doing, and journaling, coloring. We got so excited about this age of access to information and access to each other that we kind of cut into our downtime and our meditative time. At the same time, we're more aware that we really need that. And so some people are doing more yoga, and, you know, the more people are walking now and stuff like that. But it's any of that, like the yoga and um, the walking in particular can be interrupted a lot by phone calls and by podcasting and stuff like that. So the coloring time, generally you're just doing coloring, or, um, sitting down and just unleashing with your journal, words and images. And, what I use in my journal, I didn't bring one up here to show you, but what I use in my journal is a whole selection of colored pens. So each day can be a different color. And then if I feel like doodling, I can bring out all the rest of the pens or a few extra pens and do
I've
some
always had
drawings.
a pen fetish. Always had a pen fetish.
Right. And I think a lot of people do, because even though we're all in a age of computers, there's more varieties of pen and pencils out there than forever.
It's when I pick up a pen, it's very like, what does it feel like in my hand, and is it comfortable, and is it thick, is it thin, is it the right color? I mean, my husband would always say, I need a particular kind of pen. Don't buy me any other kind of pen, because I like, and we all have this.
Oh yeah, that's one thing I've been known to steal every once in a while. Not from a store necessarily, but if I go visit someone and they have the perfect pen, I'm just like, whoa,
Wow, that's a really
this
nice
this this
pen.
this pen, and it doesn't have to be expensive or anything, but if it just writes really nicely, I'm like, I'm gonna need this. It's got some creative like juju in it, so I'm gonna need this. But yeah.
I just remembered the journal's called a bullet journal.
Ah, bullet journal. Okay.
Bullet journal.
I guess I'm
And
not really familiar with that
it's
term,
not
but
fancy. It's just a grid book
mhm.
where you just create every page is what you want it to be.
Yeah, nice. I
Some people do recipes like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, Sometimes you can just I have one book that I use just for when I feel like some really cool insight has come to me that's short and succinct, and or a little haiku type poem, I put it in that book. And it's just, gathering up little notes. And then I found out a lot of other people do that same thing, but it's just a little book for little things, and each one gets a little drawing with it.
Books are important because when I was thinking about this the other night when in like hundreds of years from now, when if I'm thinking of the worst case scenario, if there's no digital, right? They'll have no way of knowing what we thought, what we did. They'll think we did nothing. It will be called, the 20s, the 2030s were the dark ages because people didn't communicate with each other. They didn't write anything down. There was no language because we
I,
don't, everything's on a computer. You email each other. There are no letters.
mhm.
You,
Yet
you know,
self yet self-publishing is like at an all-time high. People are going out and publishing their own books like crazy.
right. But a lot of the books, they publish books, but the predominant, I won't say all, predominantly people get them digitally.
I honestly, I'm like a analog reader, so I find my books analog. I can't stand to have something in my ear, like listening. I mean, it just puts me to sleep, or interrupts my meditative time when I'm walking. That time is for me and the flowers and my own thoughts. So I don't do books like some people do. And I don't drive like some people do either. But I do write books, and like my books are
Wow.
like this is one of my pieces where I'm working with
What
unleashing
does the word say?
infinity.
I can't see it. What does the word
Oh, they
say?
can't.
It's a little blurry.
It says, I am immersed in calm waters.
There you go.
And this was a series of um, I am I am paintings that this one says, uh, flappable wings, we are flying now. And it's basically, I was challenging the idea of infinity and what does it really mean
Oh, really?
in
That's interesting.
color and
Mhm.
in words. And it's like, what if infinity started flying around? Because we often use infinity as like a fact. Um,
Well, that's,
you're
it's interesting that I said color, but it's taking themes and doing different things with them.
right, right. And I did like hundreds of pictures of these infinities, but this is one. Can you read that?
Yes. Do you see my soul and all its divinity as I cross your path
And there's the two two
to
infinities.
infinity?
Right. That's a really big painting. And so the idea is, to kind of unwind, it as a mathematical symbol or as this totally abstract thing that we never really think about, and try and give it life and bring it bring it into this world as a living being. Because a lot of this, I mean, we're in the quantum age. We know that all this information is really out there in this fluid manner. All these things that we thought weren't fluid are even way more fluid than we can imagine. So that's my the title of that book is Evolving Infinitely. In
Wow. It's
it's thick. It's a thick book, but it's only because this is like a coffee table version with thick
right.
pages,
It's each page is thick.
right? But yeah, I really enjoy doing the paintings first and then letting them give me their message once they're finished in a form of just a little phrase or a little saying or something. And that makes me really happy. So
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that people say, "Oh, I'm right brain, I'm left brain, whatever," which means I'm not this and I am that. I don't necessarily think that it's all one or the other. I think it's
um
how they communicate. First of all, I don't necessarily know if one lobe is doing something so completely different than the other, but if one is the creative and if one is more the pragmatic or logical, it's how they communicate with each other that provides people with different ways of creatively communicating.
yeah, I think that I mean, I agree with your original sentiment that we're all creative individuals. Um, whether we own that or not is, just semantics. But we all take pride in what we do to a certain degree, and that's itself is a creative process. But I think that, yeah, I mean, the whole idea of being a human is a creative process, right? I mean, we have this little story of a sperm and an egg sitting there, and the sperm comes along, and but it's all creation. You know, that's what creation really is. It's this ever evolving energy with a consciousness. And we who take human form, I don't know if you believe in reincarnation or not, but we take human form over and over again. Each time we come back, we come back to be creative, to to interact with others, to see what it's like to be here, to participate in group things and participate as an individual, and participate as a family, and participate as a with animals or with plants or all of it. And I think you always have people on extreme spectrums, where they are maybe too creative and don't have any structure to them, and then the ones that are overly structured. But our brains, I think, when we're in harmony, structure, and which really structure is like the masculine if you're talking energetically, and creativity is the feminine. And structure and form would continue to ebb and flow um, openly. Like now we almost overprize structure, and yet you can't have any structure without creativity. But if you get too attached to the structure, that's when you have systems that no longer serve, or or you know like a car that needs to be recycled. It's like the structure it needs to be reinvented and all the time, and recreated all the time. And to me, harmony would be in our brains and in our society and with humans would be you know giving as much credence to the creative process as you do to the structure, and not
Mm.
just focusing on the structure. And in that sense, you would be giving a lot more credence to the feminine and not just to the masculine.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the woman who is a journalist said she was talking about the fact that she has never been good in the kitchen. She's useless in the kitchen. She doesn't care that she's not good in the kitchen. And yet, um, she loves to research and communicate with people and get news out and things like that. And I think that that's creative. That is what, she may have more structure, but meanwhile, I don't think a person who thinks I'm not creative. I don't do anything creative. There's nothing creative about me. They really need to rethink that, really, because maybe they're good at sports. I'm sorry, that's creative. If
Well, you're
you've
doing
got,
it. Yeah,
if you've got a mentality where it's almost like chess. You're when you play chess, it's creative because you've
right.
got a three-dimensional concept of this game as it plays out. You're creating that as you go along. So creativity is not just um, pen on a piece of paper and let's draw it. It's not. It's so many different things. It's gardening.
Hmm.
It's food, like you said. It can be um, visual, but it can also be in words. It can be singing. It could be dancing. I mean, we could go on. It's just all over the place. Creativity's all over the place.
I was My deepest understanding of creativity is actually um, channeling new information,
Hmm.
and structures taking that new information and putting it into a form. Like we're not going to take the same rocket ship to the moon twice. We're going to, I mean, people say, oh, you're not downloading it. We sit down and we think about it and we come up with new formulas. But if you look at examples, even in the mathematical arena, of like the man who knew infinity, that story, it's like every time he sat down to meditate, the algorithms would come. it was channeled information that they're still parsing and using and finding uses for these mathematical applications today. And it's, years later. And it's just creativity um, is your connection to source to to get new ideas, you know, even in how to put together the structure. So you need teams that all get this collective understanding of, how we're going to go forward with this structure to make something big, but to make something small, like a painting, like some paintings are big, you really can just create, but you're still using the structure of maybe materials or canvases or something like that, but or gravity. But it's an ebb and flow, and when we understand our this is going to sound really woo woo, but when we understand that we are creative beings, um, and we ebb and flow between structure and creativity, we've understood our entire divinity.
Well, I was thinking that creativity is whatever that conscious awareness is that is somewhat unique between people. The word itself is an expression and it gives you a structure. Oh, I understand what you mean by awareness, but we're all aware and conscious in different ways.
Yep.
And we're interpreting everything through that ability to be conscious and aware. And then we communicate that to each other. Now, if
Hmm.
we were alone, totally alone, I think we would still feel the need to communicate it to ourselves, to almost prove um, that what we see is what we get. It's an odd type of a thing. I'm here with my dogs most of the time, and there would be, you think, there would be no reason to communicate, have uh, rambling conversations with dogs, but I do. And that's because I feel the need to communicate. Now, of course, I'm communicating with dogs, so there is another awareness. But I would say that if I were all alone on an island and all I had was birds and bees and flowers and trees, I'd be communicating with them because it is it is because it's what we do.
Yes, there was a interesting. I can't remember any reference points on it, but there was an interesting interview with some uh, a tribe somewhere that had to not really been that introduced to civilization yet, and they were asking um, the interviewer, like, or they were telling the interviewer that they talk to the stars and they can hear the stars, and the interviewer's like, "What?" And they're like, "You mean you can't hear the stars?" It's like they didn't understand, but that's what that right. So even communicating with the stars, that was for them, this communication. And I think right now there's a lot of those channels that are open. There's more people communicating with stars and planets and dimensional beings and angels and spirit guides and all kinds of really in UFOs. Those have always been a fascinating area of communication. So yes, if it was not another person or a dog, the plants, the water, the sand, the all of it, you could easily find friends.
Exactly. I
Or
mean,
you'd probably go crazy. Those would be your two choices.
and even still, while I'm going crazy, you'd probably be drawing the wildest things. I mean, if you don't have paint, what would you do? You would play with sand,
Right. Stick in the
you
sand
know,
works
or,
just great.
yeah, right, or dirt, or
Hmm.
you would find whatever mud, and you would throw it on a wall. I mean, I don't mean throw it. I'm just saying you would put it on a wall. The simplest thing, those handprints.
Hmm.
You know, we have a need to communicate.
Hmm. Right.
and
To commune, actually to commune,
to
you
commune.
know? Yeah, to be together, to socialize. And that's another interesting aspect of the creation and the structure. You know, you can commune through structure. You know, if you set up the rules, this is a family structure, this is a, you know, dogmatic religious structure, this is, you know, our work structure. And that brings a lot of comfort to a lot of people to have that structure. And it's really interesting to allow the creative aspects of that structure to express itself without losing the structure that's needed. And we all have seen that unfold around us. Like that structure seems really antiquated, but yet people are still getting so much out of it, you know, and how do you evolve it? And these are like interesting conundrums for the humanity, for human race, you know, and some people just step outside the structure, which is easy to do in this country because we have a value for freedom as well as structure. Probably freedom's prized much higher than creativity. Um,
When you were talking about the structure, I immediately thought of um, high mass at a Catholic church,
mm,
which can be infuriating or
exalted.
incredible, you know, an incredible feeling, you know,
Hmm.
enlightenment. It could be both. Because, you know, I've said to a number of people, no, I'm not Catholic, so trust me when I mess it up. But um, a friend of mine, when I was younger, would always invite me to Christmas midnight mass, and this was when the mass was still in Latin,
Probably
and
still at
I would
midnight too.
and midnight midnight in Latin, and I would go, and it was between the candles and the incense and the choir. It was just an incredible experience.
And the exalted ceilings, you know, that echoes that sound and that vibration of what's taking place in those homilies, and the music goes all the way through your entire system, and it's very um, transformative.
Yes. So, you know, and if you do mention that to people, they'll say, "Oh, Catholic. Oh, you know." And you know, you're off talking about priests and pedophiles, and that has nothing to do with it.
No, but that's part of the structure that didn't isn't evolving fast enough, though. I mean, you've
Exactly.
got one aspect of the structure that's very spiritual, and another aspect that's saying, you know, you know, we're like stuck, you know, we're stuck in this dark place, the yin yang of a Catholic church almost. So
Yeah.
it's hard, but it's not just hard, it's actually the human. It's us people's job to keep testing and evolving and, you know, getting these creative downloads, whatever form they take, and evolving the structure. And sometimes it's important to destroy the structure altogether. And even if we don't think so, Mother Nature might think so. And then you can start over. Um, but generally speaking, you know, uh, we have a cooperative nature to expand, to grow, to learn more, to try new things. Um, and structures, I think most structures get corrupted when they have a strong hierarchy to them, you know, and the
Well, especially
hierarchy
when that
becomes
when
more important.
especially yeah, or when you're in some amount of change, and that hierarchy may no longer um, present you with a solution. It's actually part of the problem. So, you know, the church at some point in time was solving community problems. And then at some point, it ceased to solve those problems and it began to create complications, right? Um, it's sort of why I am so fascinated by tradition, because there
Hmm.
are so many rituals and traditions that were created that word created um, to manage something,
Hmm.
right? To manage some sort of a process. Um, and at some point, It doesn't fit. What do you do when that happens? Do you just get rid of the whole process, or does the process evolve? Sometimes, like you said, Mother Nature just like breaks it completely. And sometimes you throw something out and it changes and it turns into something else.
There's a book out there called The Triumph of Christianity. And in The Triumph of Christianity, I think the overriding point the guy makes is that Christianity chooses to evolve. Maybe not the Catholic Church evolving very quickly, but Christianity was like, you want Christmas trees? We'll have Christmas trees. You want this? We'll have this. They allowed, not universally all the time. We all know the horror stories where they didn't do that, but the they were more interested in expanding than dogma. And so they would evolve. And if you look at the whole 2000 years of it, you see the milestones where they evolved. And, like in the 600s, was it the 600s? I think it was the 600s. They say, you want a hell? We'll have a hell. You know, a place where bad people go, we don't care. Jesus didn't really talk about that, but and hell became very popular. All the religions were like, wow, this is great. We can, use this as
Have a place where bad people go. But the point is, the thing is, they needed an explanation. The structure was the solution to the problem. Why are there bad people? And what do we do with those people? So, some of the one part of the solution was, well, there's a hell for bad people. So there's retribution. So don't worry about it. They're going to get they're going to get theirs. It's the same concept of karma. And I've always
right,
told people, you don't need to be there. Karma's
right.
going to happen. You don't have to be sitting there, the fly in the wall, to watch whoever it is, get theirs. It happens all the time.
hmm It happens, and even if it doesn't happen in this lifetime, it'll happen in a later one.
It may very, I don't, I cannot, I cannot stop thinking about consciousness and the before and the after, because it's the same for me. It's the same concept of space, because you say to yourself, oh, there was a big bang, but what happened before that? And what happens after that? And and so, I mean,
But
it's
what's your
very,
deepest sense of it? What's your deepest sense of consciousness? The
my
beginning.
deepest sense of consciousness is that everything has some amount of awareness. And it can be, we can do the physical where it's attracted to each other. So two things are, attracted.
hmm
When your hair gets electric and you put your hand onto it, it gets attracted. It can be that simple. That's a very simple awareness. And now is the hair saying, oh, look at that hand. I just love that hand. I'm going over there. It just happens. And the awareness is not along the lines of a thought process like we as humans think. It's more along the lines of, I'm going over there. I'll
hmm
say I'm going over there. So there's those mechanical things that are going on. And then as elements become, and I don't want to say humans, and I don't want to say um, any type of an element, any element, whether it's a mineral, flora, fauna, mineral, whatever it is, as it becomes more complex, that awareness becomes more complex. And at some point, it's highly complex. And for any any uh, any life form that has this brain that we have, it becomes very complex. And so we've got animals, an amoeba definitely has some sort of an awareness, some consciousness, but it's not thinking as we do because it doesn't have that the same center, the same um I don't know, foundation. So do we think like dogs? No, but there's something going on there. Like any animal that has a brain, there's something going on there.
Well, animals are pretty complex in general.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I mean, a
plant.
bear, a squirrel. I don't care. They all have brains, so
Mhm.
they're remembering. Now that everything that goes on with them, they may not want to sit down and write a book and read a book and make a painting, but they're quite capable of all of these complex things that we do. Um, it's just that their universe, how they're communicating their awareness and they're communicating their environment, everything that's going on, it's just somewhat different. They don't see the same way we see, whether it's, we see this and we have this also, birds see, out of the sides of their, I mean, there are different ways of seeing, of smelling, of feeling, of touching, of, tasting, all of those things impact our brains. So the amount of awareness and what we're conscious of and how we communicate that and how we remember that and apply that, that's part of that evolution thing. So um, could in 5,000 years from now, could somebody come to this planet and find that crows are the leading, you know, the top of the food chain? Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. It's really possible. Or on some other planet, maybe, given the different situation. So, when it comes to planets in the universe, and when you start getting really big and you blow out, the concept of consciousness really gets wild. Because that's when you think, okay, so if I'm conscious and everybody right now on the planet is conscious, and if you really can't kill that consciousness because it's not biological, it's awareness, it's energy, it's attraction. It may dissipate, but it's out there. And so it bouncing off of other awarenesses and I'm like, yeah, and it gets kind of weird. It
Yeah,
gets more than 2, 3 dimensional. It gets kind of weird.
I just call it multidimensional. I mean, it's like we don't really know how many dimensions are out there. We're so used to our 3D world where we can see things three-dimensionally, and it's for me, I've dabbled in communicating with all kinds of beings, from dolphins to whales to um, pets to
Dead
you know
people.
to dead people. I can talk to them. And I've read a lot of interesting books written by other people who have bothered to look beyond, what we normally look at. And it seems like the origin of consciousness, um, to me, my deepest understanding of it is just this undiscerning love, which is um, somehow, and this is where I don't have any sense of it. Somehow, this undiscerning love, is particles, light particles and dark particles. There's the space, and eventually that space, being created more complex things like minerals. It- and then it created more, when I say it, these elements then created more complex things and more complex things. And humans are about as complex as it gets. And it's not that that makes us the highest intelligence, though, because like a dolphin, for example, has been around longer than humans have. So they have knowledge of the seas and ways to communicate that humans don't have, although we study what they do and we're learning a lot from them. But they also have, a long history of wisdom and, you know, and they've truly been able to like exist in this more I wouldn't call it commune, I'd call it more democracy way of being, where they actually, because they can communicate telepathically, if they want dolphins to like make a group decision, they can spread the questions out telepathically, and they can get the answers back telepathically, and they can know whether everybody, just know without counting, that everybody responded. And and if somebody's bad, they deal with it collectively. They don't just like send them, they don't have things like hell and heaven per se. But
Oh, we don't know, but it would be a different concept of health.
well, this is just according to some of the interviews that I've been involved in with dolphins. But it was interesting because in the end, they're like, we know how to do all this. So in a way, our government is more evolved than you, our way of governing each other. And we can do things that you can't do, like flips out of the water and stuff like that. But for the most part, they're actually very interested in humans because we bring to the table a whole different level of type of existence. And we, because of how we've evolved, and we have like full dexterity in our fingers and our toes and our, these uh, huge capacities for creating structures. Like, a dolphin is living mostly without structure, very fluid life, almost pun intended that they're in the water, but a fluid existence. And we actually create obstacles for us to overcome, even if it's just like heavier weights in the gym. Here's an obstacle. Let me see if I can pick that one up. Now I practiced at that. Let me give myself another obstacle. And they're actually, a lot of people think, oh, the dolphins, but they're actually very interested in like, why do we do all this stuff? And how does it, you know, how do we create this stuff? And, they're very interesting. They have interesting connections to us. It's like, yes, they can heal faster than we can, and they have all this healing knowledge, and that's why people like to swim with them. But at the same time, they're like, we couldn't build a boat, we couldn't create TV, or a computer. So they're kind of fascinated. But it seems like, I like the story you said about, or the way you talked about, each thing that's more complex has more consciousness. I don't know if it's always exactly like that. It sort of is like that, but at the same time, things like a dolphin and a human can have completely different consciousnesses.
Completely different.
So even though the human may have a little more than the dolphin, because the dolphin's been around longer and has certain things evolved, they have a different evolved consciousness than what we're doing over here. And we still have things we can learn from each other. It's all but it's like true. I think that the more complex, the more consciousness, but it's also true that things can have completely different consciousnesses.
But
It's almost like there's so many truths out there that
I know
you
the
could go
thing
on and
is,
on.
the thing is, the dolphin has, relatively speaking, a fixed environment. Okay, so it's water,
Hmm.
right? But within that water, we think, oh, they're only water. But think about it. Um, they can navigate up, down, left, right, and then all the angles thereof,
Hmm.
and get there. It's like for us, go to California and there's no roads.
Hmm.
Go to California. Oh, where is it? Just go. They know. They know. They're
Right.
like, we have to go to that water, that warm water. It's time for us to go to that warm water. They know. They just go because it's in their mind, it's in their memory, and they go. There's no roadmap. Now, is it possible that they're like, oh, make a left when you see that color coral?
Maybe they're talking to fish all along the way. Which way to California? Which way to California? But
you know,
it is true. It is true. I think they really have done something that humans I know can do, but don't really do it. And that's the telepathy. Really being able to communicate. And we do it from time to time. I mean, there's whenever you see a big movement, like Woodstock was a great fun example. People just suddenly knew they had to be there, and they just went like zombies to Woodstock. How did they get all that communication? There really was it wasn't even the internet and email and texting like there is now. But it's just, sometimes I think the phone is like the last precursor to just instant information anytime we want it, in the same sense that the dolphins have it. Information about navigating, information about, who has a collective thought, and individual thoughts. What can we do together right now? Like, if we all need to get up one day and do something, it'll happen.
It's like if you were blind, or if you were unable to hear, your other senses become sharper.
Right.
You realize, as humans, we all have all of these senses, but imagine if suddenly something was cut off for everyone.
Right.
For us to survive, we would have to adapt to that new normal, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And that's sort of why we're this way, and the dolphins are the way they are. They adapted in water
Hmm.
with no directions, with things constantly changing around them. They're because they don't have hands. They have little fins and little tails, um, and big faces. I mean, they can move things, but they're not going to necessarily create a house for themselves.
Hmm.
So they're dealing with a whole set of things, a whole set of an environment, and those things that they have. Yeah, right. I turned one phone off, but not the other. A whole set of options that are very unique to them, and they evolve within them. And that's
Hmm.
sort of why we are what we are, because we have hands, we have vocal cords, we have eyes, we have ears, so we can feel. I mean, we have all of these abilities available to us to begin to create. Now, I was thinking also, take a crow, or again, we'll talk about those big blackbirds that are called crows and ravens. They create tools.
Yeah, they do. They have a really interesting aptitude, don't they?
They create tools. They say that jumping spiders are like incredibly intelligent. So, how we are interpreting consciousness is just, first of all, it's how we are able to understand it. So while I might say, reincarnation, oh, I believe in reincarnation, it's a whole concept that has some amount of rules to it that may or may not be what it is, but it's
Right.
closer than saying, oh, I don't believe in it at all. And do birds think that they're gonna come back? I would say no. I would assume that they're conscious, but I don't know if they're worrying about, should I write a will so that, somebody gets the nest done? Because the kids are going to fly back to that same area and use that nest next year, or the following year, and the following year, and the following year. It's in the will. It's in
Right.
the will.
It's already written. It's already written. Well, yeah, it's different for each and every creature, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's part of the consciousness. Because we're so complex, we tend to make this whole big stuff out of it.
Yeah.
But how we remember things out of patterns, why we do those things, that's part of the consciousness, and that's part of how we evolve. Again, you had mentioned dolphins and telepathy, because they don't, talking underneath water is just like blah, 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 blah. And you could do it. I mean, over time you could do it, and you could create a language. They would need to have a mouth and a they don't have necessarily all the things to make those words heard. So they're going to use a whole slew of what they have, whether it's a gesture. So it's not just telepathy. It may be complete telepathy, but it may be maybe a smell in the water, maybe
Mhm.
a wave in the water. You know what I'm saying? It could be a thought in the water. Um, it could be something that's carried from one thing to the next to the next. I mean, it could be any amount of things that we're calling telepathy because we don't understand it, but they're actually talking.
Mhm.
And it could be completely mental, but it could be any number of other things. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like if two blind, deaf, and people who are unable to speak. I was going to use. I almost said dumb, and I'm like, oh, that might not have been politically correct. So people
Or
who cannot
polite.
speak, not non. What do they call them? Non. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a
Nonverbal
nonverbal.
people.
Thank nonverbal.
Mhm.
So if you put them all in a room, they're going to communicate. As soon as they realize that they're all there, as soon as they all touch
Right.
each other, they're going to start to communicate. They'll create their own society. That doesn't mean that they're not communicating.
Right.
They have to get their thoughts across to each other.
Right.
Some way.
Well, they're definitely communicating, whether they're talking or not, using the
Right.
same talky words as other people. But
At
yeah,
some point, they're going to
communications.
create. They're going to create something that everyone understands
Yeah, there's
sooner or
that word
later.
again. There's that word
Understands
again. Hmm.
or community or what? Which word? All the words?
Oh, create
Create. Yeah,
the
we
word. Circling it back to the word
same
create.
word.
They're going to
I
create
really
a
think it's
way.
important for people. I think it's important for people to understand when they say, "Oh, I'm not creative. My husband is." Whatever. Wrong. 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 Oh, I don't
Yeah,
do anything. I can't do anything like that. I'm sorry.
I know. That's totally just a perspective and way you look at it. Really. Speaking of creating those flowers, I'm like, during COVID, I had to start talking to the flowers. They gave me no choice. And they're like, that's a little peony in there. Um, but for me, that's a shifting consciousness when I see it. And each flower bud basically told me that they're creating new consciousness in every time they bloom. And that is one way to immerse yourself in flowers, the creativity of flowers. They're always slightly different. They're always slightly different colors. And yet they don't have any karma. They don't have any history. They're just taking new information from the sun, new information from the earth, and they're creating a new consciousness. So every bloom, grids and grids of blooms are creating new consciousness. And they're actually helping shift our consciousness by creating new consciousness themselves. They just want credit for being some shifters of the consciousness.
They do. They
Creative.
probably do some amount of communication chemically.
Oh, energetically they do. Energetically and chemically. They can chemically is a little more trees and stuff because they can actually have roots and they're there and they can communicate with other trees. But um the
Well, they're
flowers are
communicating with the bees.
well, yeah, and that's vibrationally. So their patterns and um, they put up a lot of positive charges, and then that attracts the bees who swings buzz and make a negative charge, and then um, that actually can cause the pollen to jump off the flower onto the bee, and they're vibrational, basically consciousness and vibration more than chemical.
But there's smell and there's color.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's
All
a
of
lot
it's
going
part of
on.
it. All of it's part of it. All of it has a vibration and an attraction. But they basically they want credit for helping to shift the world with their little creating new consciousnesses all the time. That's what they want. Syncretic. We all know they're energetic because people make, flower essences that are used in all kinds of wellness products, and we've been using flowers in medicine for years, but we don't think of flowers as a consciousness shifter. And they said you can go out and stare at a beautiful picture of us, or you can go out and sit with us, but you can actually absorb new consciousness by doing that,
I have
not just
always,
meditating.
I'm an outdoor kind of a person. And when I do, first of all, the first thing that I noticed this week, outdoor person, I pass the same trees all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been passing the same trees for the past 25 years, all the time, every day, at least once, sometimes twice a day. And I looked out and I said, oh, look, it's spring, because the,
Crocus.
maybe it's elm, maybe it's oak. I'm not exactly
Oh.
certain. But the trees, I call them the beards, because they
Mm-hmm.
let suddenly the tips start to color up. Right now it's that little red color, so they're not red trees, but the color looks red. That's all
Mm-hmm.
I could say. And it's small, but it's all over the tree, and the trees are huge. And I look up, I'm like, oh, here we go, this is beautiful. And whack job that I am, the tree told me to look.
Mm-hmm.
Tree said, here I am, look at me,
Yeah.
look, it's
Right.
spring.
Absolutely. Well, you're listening. That's good.
I'm
That's
here,
a good
I'm
sign.
here, I'm here.
You speak.
And
You speak tree.
yeah, I speak tree. And then now that I was aware, I was looking at the grass and I saw some of the crocus come up, and I was like, see, this is important. People don't take it in, or they take it in so quickly that it's forgotten. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not a conversation like, oh, what happened today? Oh, well, Bill came over and we were talking blah 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 blah, and you talk all, tell everything what Bill said. In the meantime, I had a whole conversation with the tree.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What was it about? Spring. Rebirth. That's it? Yeah, that's a big it.
Yeah,
That's a big
right, exactly.
It's a big it. And the same thing happens in the winter. Because I'll look up at a tree and obviously it's changing color, or I'll recognize, oh, it's getting colder, and that green is going to go, and all the trees are going to be bare, and oh gosh, I'm sorry, And the tree says, oh, don't be sad. I'll be back. I'll be back. So it's all good.
Yeah.
And for the most part, most of them do come back. So, again, when you said, what is it that you think, of consciousness, that awareness does not necessarily need to be a 500-page book that tells everybody everything about everything. It's a one word, but it's so strong, and it's clearly communicated. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I could be bizarre in saying that the trees told me it was spring, because I knew it was spring. All I needed to do is check the calendar. Oh, it's March. But if I had no calendar and I didn't know what time of the day it was, where I was, or what anything, the tree would have told me it's
Right.
time.
Mm-hmm.
It's time. Used to be robins. That as soon as I saw that first robin, I knew
Mm-hmm.
that it was spring. But I'd say in the past 5 to 10 years, and I've talked with people about it, and somebody told me that it's true, robins are not flying south as much as they used to.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
maybe they
so
don't
some
need
of the
to.
robins never leave.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
But when I was a kid, they all left. You saw no robins in the winter. None. So, different things do happen. Do robins talk to me? Sometimes.
The
They don't
robins
say much, but they do.
are robins changing their consciousness?
Yeah, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
it's at some point it said you don't have to.
It's interesting.
Just hang out here. It's okay. It's cool.
All that travel we did for years and years and years. Why do we really do it anyway?
It's warm here. It's just as good. It's
Hmm.
really, it's okay. And just stop. Just,
Hmm.
don't move. Just stop. And that's an odd type of a thing. We're talking about, um, dolphins, fish, whales, mammals, whatever. Fish and mammals being in water, and they're being able to navigate and or communicate. Well, birds in the air. Again, how did they know where to come back to and where to go?
Right, right, right.
Obviously, they know something we don't know. They've got
Yeah,
a compass in their head.
right.
Uh,
And and easy, and it's easy for them to figure it out. And us, we'd be like, "What?" You know, flapping our wings, and we never get off the ground, even.
ex- exactly. I mean, they have, because they don't have all the senses that we have, or the senses that they have are fine or more fine tuned. They're able to see different things. So, are they able to see longitude and latitude? Maybe.
I don't know that they call them that though.
No, no. But did they see the ley lines? Maybe.
Oh yeah,
They
those
did
might.
they see. They see something,
Hmm. Or
and
they
they're
just
able.
know.
They just know,
Hmm.
and over time they remember, and the the way, especially in the advent of AI, the way we learn things is by memorizing, and then our
Hmm.
memory brings them back, and we see patterns, and that's sort of like somewhat of a deja vu. When we
Hmm.
see a pattern that's similar, we're like, "Oh, I've been here before." Well, yeah, you have, because the pattern is
Right.
exactly matching, what has happened previously. And so, we do it that way, and that's part of our consciousness. I'd say that's probably what happens to a lot of animals on different levels, and they're able to store and restore and use and adapt all of that information, um, differently for
Hmm.
their needs.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I don't necessarily go totally woo woo, but there's a certain amount of acceptable woo woo for me. You know, do I
I
believe
love.
in ghosts? Do I believe in ghosts? Necessarily, but do I think that people are communicating with me beyond the veil? Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
There you go. There you go. There's your there's you can define a ghost any way you want to. But yeah, it's there's a lot out there. And I think that other people have different access points. So some people might see ghosts everywhere, and some people might see fairies everywhere, and some people might see nothing.
exactly. Are you doing anything special in the next, over the spring or the summer? Any um, places you're going, or things you're seeing, or things you're doing?
Um, that's a really good question. I did so much last year, went so many interesting places, and this year I vowed I would work on my art more and use some of the stuff I learned from last year to create more art. So I don't have any big plans set up, but I'll probably go back to Bimini to swim with the dolphins one more time. That's like um, that was really special for me, and I felt a real connection to that whole Bermuda Triangle area. So I really enjoyed myself there. I last year I went. Where did I go? California twice, Florida a bunch of times, Moorea and the French Polynesians to swim with the whales, Hawaii to swim with the whales and the dolphins, Bimini. I was like tromping all over the place. Go up to Erie, Pennsylvania quite a bit to be with my family, and I don't know this year. It's been It's been I just got back from Florida, trip with my family down there, but it's I don't think I would have chosen Florida at this point. Uh, had it not been convenient for everybody else to meet down there. Where are you headed?
I my routine is to plant a garden
Mm,
and tend it. So
okay.
I'm right now thinking about different something different. I always plant something the same things.
Hmm.
I always plant tomatoes and cucumbers because those that's like that's a summer food. I live
Yeah,
on those things.
right.
So those two things I plant. And now I'm thinking, oh, well, every year I do the same thing. But aside from tomatoes and cucumbers, peppers and eggplants. I'm like, I think I'm gonna do potatoes. I think I'm gonna do a whole bunch of different things this year.
Oh yeah, good, good. That'll be fun. Well, I'm trying to start a greeting card company. That's not a trip. Um, Using the flowers, the images from the flowers that I have, these abstract macro images and their consciousness and their messages in greeting cards. And I'm calling it botanical superconsciousness. So watch for that. Um,
That'll be
and
fun.
yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited to work with my paintings a little bit more this year than I did last year. I've had so many interruptions. I put the big paintings aside, and this year I'm pulling everything back out. So I think we'll see what happens, but I think there's going to be a lot of spiritual work with the flowers this year and paintings more than trips. But the greeting card company, I'll let you know if that actually it takes a long time to get those established, but I'm trying to transcend a few of those um, ideals of linear time and it taking a long time. But I've got my first samples in, and um, I'm putting them tomorrow in my first store, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Where where can people find? Is your artwork online? And if so, where? Otherwise, how can people find your artwork?
The best way to find it right now is just go to KarenEdgett.com. It's Karin Edgett.com. And I have stuff up there. I have a lot of stuff up there. It's a huge variety of my work up there. For my food stuff's up there, free recipes, and all of my links to my books and stuff like that are up there. But I will put links on that page when my Botanical Super Consciousness card company is live. I'll put a link, and all the card stuff will probably move over there. And then um, I'll also have I'm gonna be adding my bigger paintings to a platform coming up soon where people can buy them. But all that'll be connected through my own website. And you can sign up to be on my email list if you want. And I wait for words of wisdoms and in the
Um,
art world and in the photography world and the
I'll
food
be
world.
sure to I'll be sure to put the link to your website down below.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Joy.
I always have fun. We always go off on a tangent, and really, it's a lot of fun
Oh yeah, it's the subject of consciousness and creativity. You can go on. We could go on
for
for
real.
days and days and days.
And every single time I think about it, it's constantly changing. It's like smoke, smoke in a room. You know that it's there, but every single time you look at it, it's different. It's a different
Yeah,
pattern. And where does
yeah,
it go? And where does it come from?
yeah. And I think it's actually fun to move into that space where you even allow things that you thought you knew to be changed into something else that now you know this on top of that, and it changes what everything else that you knew. Just like everything can become a current understanding. Look, this is what I understand today, and ask me a year from now, I'll see if it's the same or it's totally different. And allow yourself to be totally part of the creative process, like your whole, adherence to facts and structures. Pick structures that make you feel good, like your house.
Right.
What?
And I'm glad you mentioned the word structure because you can be very fluid with lots of structure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Structure really to me, structure and creativity have an ebb and flow. When
Yes.
they're in harmony and balance, we're 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 leading from our heart. We can know when it's time to shift the structure, and we can all work creatively to shift it. And I know there's always going to be somebody who's hanging on to that old structure. That's, I think, why one of the famous quantum physics scientists, Bose, said that science advances the death of one scientist at a time. Because
No, it's
because
true. It's true.
yeah, and so that's maybe why we don't live that long. It's because we need to, like, one way of us evolving as humans is to let people die off when they, you know,
And then
take their
everything.
old ways with them. So if you're a real romantic, you're probably like, oh, I remember the good old days. But to
But
me,
while
these
we were
are,
living them, they weren't good and they weren't old and they weren't.
when I was born, I wasn't even allowed to have my own checking book. So I'm like happy that some things have changed.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But then also when we were born, we would sit outside in the front lawn and be able to see all the stars,
Yeah, that's true.
not
You
just
could,
like 15 of them.
right. And if you're born somewhere, you'd be able to hear the stars.
I was,
I was
you'd be,
think I was thinking to myself that it might be interesting to try and start really listening to the stars.
if you go to places where there are a lot of stars, I think you do hear them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I
Now, it
never.
may be that what you're hearing is like the environment around you, but the environment around you is part of that picture.
I just had not consciously tried to tune into the stars as audibly. Getting messages from them, maybe, but not audibly. Like maybe
Mm,
they sing. Maybe there is a resonance there that's really quite interesting.
this definitely.
I, s- I studied. I'm on the board of this nonprofit called the Inspire Project, and one of the things that we do, it's a NASA education spinoff, and one of the things that we have is a kit to measure these ultra low sound frequencies that you can't hear from your ear. And so they put together a kit and they can listen to the sounds, and the sounds are from uh, interference in the atmosphere, usually considered like lightning.
Exactly.
We'll hear the thunder as the lightning's coming back together, but that lightning actually puts a resonance in the air, and that you can see it. It's the same resonance that you can see in an aurora borealis, but you can actually hear it through these machines, these little antenna kits that you can put together. It's really quite fascinating um, to start
Well,
hearing
some
things
people,
you don't really know are there.
um, I know it's a word with a dis, but I can't remember the full word, where their senses are switched.
Mm.
So they can taste color and you know uh hear touch. I mean, all their
Hmm.
senses are screwed. It's this something or other. And people actually live like that. So that's what I'm saying. We take for granted all of what we have to offer and how that works with our
Hmm.
internal system, with our operating system, and we take that all for granted. But given simply dyslexia,
Right.
right, creates a different awareness.
Right. Yeah, all of those quote unquote disorders are just a different awareness. And so, and it lends to our evolution to acknowledge the different awarenesses,
Yeah, it
um,
does. It
and
definitely does.
in yourself, and how you process information and how you absorb information and where it comes from for you. It's all very, I want to say, like, uh, it just kind of opens you up to receive, to know that you can receive information and process it differently. And it's all okay versus having to be fairly uniform in how you do it.
Right.
And it as an adult, it's like you can get on social media, you can start looking for like math geniuses that do it differently and you did. And you'll be like, sometimes I'm like, dang, I really could have been a math genius if I had been allowed to express math this way, because it's so much different than what I was told I had to do in order to, it wasn't like
Right. Right.
wasn't like, and there's so many ways that people know, and they're just spreading this information like wildfire right now. I mean, it's hard to feel like you really have a disorder anymore, because you can get on the internet and find out that this disorder is actually order.
It's just a genius.
Yeah,
Like children, like prodigal children who just walk over to a phone. They hear music and they walk over to the piano and they play it.
yeah,
And you're like, how the devil did they do that?
yeah. They're channeling. They've got the connections. They've got that super connection. So, and what did? Yeah, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful time to be alive in a lot of ways.
I've always tried to explain that to people. I mean, a lot of people will say these days, "Oh, these days are really hard, and I'm so afraid." And I'm like, I get it, I get it, but can you just choose to turn that around and think differently?
Yeah, it's
Because
a
I get
choice.
afraid. I mean, I'm afraid. I mean, I could live in fear too. Um, and I and then that's all that you're going to give other people, that you're afraid and that they become afraid, and now we've got two people who are afraid. But
Right,
would rather say you turn that around and create something out of that. Create that
right.
word again. Create
Create
something
something.
out of where you're turning a negative into a positive as much as possible. Sometimes you need negatives. Sometimes you need to be afraid to know what you need to do.
Right,
So
right.
take that fear and say, okay, I'm afraid of, I don't know, whatever it is. And I'm going to do this with it.
Well, sometimes you have to really be discerning too, because sometimes that fear isn't even yours. Like the other day, when I was in Florida, in fact, I felt terrible panic, and it felt like it was over politics. Um, and I just, I couldn't sleep. I was like, oh, it's just so, I could feel that in my belly, that deep fear. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't mine. And so I got up and I went down. We were right on the beach. So I walked miles on the beach and I just did everything I could. I'm like, here,
Take
ocean,
it back.
here, land, here, everybody, take this fear. And it hasn't been back since. I just gave it all away. That's what I mean. A lot of this fear people are more empathetic in general than people realize. And a lot of this fear people feel isn't even theirs. They're not even really afraid. Like, if you can tap into your higher connections and your higher knowledge, that things are changing pretty drastically right now. And, it's turn on your creator self, because the creator selves do really beautiful things in times of change, and
Right.
chaos. And so give the fear to Mother Earth or the heavens. They can handle it, or the waters, the oceans. They can absorb it and handle it and turn it into something better than fear. But don't make sure you're not like really afraid, that you're just not make sure you're not like hanging on to someone else's fear. And that's like a discernment, but try giving it away and see if it goes away.
Yeah. Try.
If it goes away, it probably wasn't yours.
It's almost like recognizing that it's there and then saying, and what are you going to do about it? Oh, you don't have a plan? All right. Well, then pack it up and put it somewhere, because, and you have to be, it's something that you have to teach yourself, because a lot of people would rather hold on to it because they feel responsible. They feel, the empathy is important. It's necessary, and they're trying so hard to solve something that is almost insolvable, because creating we can't create perfection. We can't solve all the problems. If you were to say, oh, I'm so upset because there's so many hungry people, I have to feed all the hungry people, I would say, how about if you like feed a few hungry people? Like, if you really feel that you need to do something, and you can do you want to like feed a few hungry people? Is that something you want to do? I had
Can
a
you feed?
conversation with
Yeah.
somebody recently, and I said, if you're feeling so strongly that something needs to change and you need to do something, what is it that you can do that will help you change? And one person, just
Yeah.
one person.
Right.
And that person came back and they said, I make music, and I feel that's, as that's me. I'm like, then do it. Then
Right.
just do it. Because
Right.
that's the solution. You just pour
Right.
yourself into that. And
Right.
that's all that we can do. There's
Right.
always going to be somebody who's hungry. Always.
Right.
We're never going to be able to feed everybody. There's going to be sadness. Someone's going to be mean. There's all, somebody's going to be born and someone's going to die. Someone's
Spoiler.
going to get fired. Someone's going to get a new job.
Right.
All these things are always going to happen. We're never going to perfect the human race. I don't
Hmm.
want to see a perfected human race. That would scare me.
Well, I mean, if you want perfection, go to hell. I mean, go to heaven. I mean, say
Or
go to
hell.
hell.
Go to really. Or
I
hell,
don't think I'm
Well,
not convinced hell exists. So if you go to hell, you might
no,
end
I
up
don't
in
think
heaven.
no, those two words are ways of yet again uh,
I just don't think there's much resistance in heaven. So if you don't like it here, zip on up to heaven.
yeah,
And
it's a
if we
way of
don't,
expressing good and bad. I mean, they're just
uh,
opposite, you got
yeah,
two sides of a coin, but in reality, there's
just one
90,000
coin,
variations thereof.
right? Or there's just one coin too. You know, but anyway, this, yeah, it's true. I think you just need to like, you know, you need to choose. You need to be able to discern, is this my fear? And you need to choose what to do with it. If it is yours, if it's not yours, what do you do with it? If it's yours, what do you do with it? It's the same question either way. But um,
And the solution doesn't need to be in a social post.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it's whatever works, though. Whatever your solution is that works, that's going to work. I mean, there's a generation that probably only knows social posts, so it's hard to.
I know.
But for
That's what I'm
me,
saying.
Mother Nature will take the fears that have inhabited me. They're not mine.
Sometimes the biggest things that happen to me are silent, totally silent to everyone
Yeah,
else. No one knows that they happened. I haven't told anybody about it. And it's the biggest thing since sliced bread, but it comes and it goes in silence.
yeah,
That's okay.
yeah. That's true. That's true. It's true. Silence is golden, right? There's
Okay. I
that
mean,
color again.
yeah.
On that note, do we become
Yeah, we've
silent?
solved all the world's problems, Karen. And basically the solution is we can't solve any problems and live with
Well,
that. It's not too bad. We can solve some of them, but there's always going to be some
how
challenge cropping up.
how about we just keep evolving?
Yeah, just keep evolving. Exactly.
Yeah,
Keep doing your best. As my mother would say, just do your best.
yeah. Good
That's all you can
advice.
do. Do your best. I'm like,
Good,
yeah, you're right, Ma. You're right.
good advice. Good advice.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Until next time.
Until next time, that's a wrap.
Bye bye.
Bye.